Where are you? It should be there. I can't find the link for it, though. It's not showing up.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, wait, there it is. I gotcha. All right, so takes me 8 years to do anything. All right, I just sent you the link. And let's get out of there.
I don't see it.
I should have just texted it to you unless I texted it to the wrong person.
Oh, okay, there it is.
Here we go. And say, I thought I just texted it to you.
All right. Ready when you are.
Go Bills. All right. So we'd like to welcome everybody into another episode of the Eurosnob Podcast. My name is Ian Smith, and I'm joined by Alex tonight. Alex, how you doing, man? Staying warm down there in Florida right now?
It's funny you say that because it's been in like the low 40s here, and it's just caused people to completely have a meltdown about the temperature. And I was thinking about you guys up there and thinking, man, 40s and 50s sounds great to you, I bet, right now.
You want to take a guess at what the high temperature, but for both tomorrow and Saturday, the highest temperature we should reach either of the 2 days?
Maybe, I don't know, 15, 20, somewhere around there?
No, it's 15 today, and it feels really warm. Take it like it's about 4.
Ooh, okay.
4.
See,
44.
There's a slight contrast in our fortunes right now. I'm living down here in Florida. Ian, if you don't know, is up there in Buffalo, New York. So kind of opposite ends of the spectrum right now. Although, I will say, Ian, along with my father, both long-suffering Buffalo Bills fans. So I know we're a soccer pod, but I got to throw a shout-out to you and the Bills Mafia. Great fans.
The Bills make me wanna kick your heels and throw
your my Bills fans out there.
Throw your head back and come on now. The Bills are making it happen.
Had to squeeze that in there at some point in time. But yeah, it's going to be real cold here, man. And 4 degrees temperature-wise, it's going to be about negative 25 wind chills. So we're staying warm. It's winter.
All of that sounds awful. I got to be honest.
Yeah, it's not too terrible. We'll be all right. We're used to it. It's Buffalo. It's the wintertime. So enough about my terrible weather existence right now. On to something slightly less terrible, and that's been our Arsenal.
Is it less terrible, though?
Slightly.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not a whole hell of a lot better, but...
And I know it's been a while since we've been on to talk primarily Arsenal, so, the fixture list has been quite crowded lately. I believe the last time we were on was after the Southampton draw. Then we had the draw against West Ham, the win against Newcastle, then a win against West Ham in the Carabao Cup, and kind of getting into the more relevant topics of discussion today. We had the draw against Liverpool, win against Palace, draw against West Brom, and draw against Chelsea. But I know that you and I kind of wanted to get into that Liverpool game just a little bit, just given how it unfolded and how you felt after that game. And I'll just kind of start big picture. I mean, what was your thought after that game when you go down 2-0, come back to make it 3-2 in about a 5-minute span, and then you give up the goal? And quite honestly, that game could have ended 5-5 or 6-6.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to steal something that you said to me before we went live. And it's kind of like, I'm stealing your stuff from you. But it's really true. And it kind of goes along with, things that we've always said. But for some reason, this team plays like they can just flick a switch. And, you can just look at the game. It was a tale of two halves. It's like they come into a game lackadaisical, not really expecting to have to work for it, and then or thinking that we can coast, and if we have to, we can turn it on. It kind of goes to the typical Arsenal, one of the many stereotypes that we continue to prove over and over again to actually be true. So
yeah, and the frustrating thing for me, well, I mean that part is frustrating, but what's more frustrating is I don't get where that complacency can come from, because the team is not that good where they can just flip a switch. When you're a Bayern Munich or a Barcelona or a PSG and you're not playing the best teams on a weekly basis, let's be honest. I mean, those are all, great teams, but when they play a team like that, like a Liverpool, even they don't come into the game thinking we can just flip a switch and we're going to play great as soon as we decide to, because they know against a team like Liverpool, if you dig yourself a hole, chances are you're not going to get out of it. Now, we had a great 5-minute stretch where everything kind of went our way, but I think it papered over the cracks to the point where, a point in that game was not necessarily the worst result, but I don't know. I feel I came out of the game more frustrated just with the mindset of the team. And I know we don't necessarily get into mindset a lot because it's kind of one of those intangible things that you can't really measure. How do you know what a player's mindset is? But there's really no other explanation for it, is there?
No, not really. And I mean, there's really two schools of thoughts as to who you want to put the blame on for that. I know a lot of people, probably the majority of people, are going to put that squarely on Arsene Wenger's shoulders. And I know we've had this discussion, numerous times on this podcast, but this isn't for me a discussion specifically about him. It's, that mindset stems directly from the players. And I know, well, the manager's job is to motivate. And if, the players are going to have that mindset, then it's the manager's job to ship them out. Sure, to a certain extent, but when you have players who are professionals, you can't just completely absolve them of any of their responsibility, and yeah, we say, the common thing at Arsenal for all these years where we've had these issues have been Arsene Wenger. But when you really look at it, there's still a lot of players that are in this team that have been here for a long time. Some of the players that, if you look at that locker room, who are the people that are going to be the bigger voices in that locker room? A lot of them are, I don't know about a lot of them anymore, because it's like the side is starting to turn over a little bit, but you've got players like Ramsey and Theo who have been there for a very, very long time. And no, we're going to argue that Theo's really on the fringes, but I guarantee you in that locker room, he's not. So there comes a certain point in time where, a player has to, even if the manager's not doing his job, a player has to take it upon themselves to say, you know what, screw this. We want to win these games. We want to win the title, so let's do it ourselves.
But, I mean, doesn't that strike you as weird that the players, if we're going off of what you said, basically have to self-manage? Doesn't that say something about the state that the club is in?
I don't think it's self-manage. It's self-motivate.
But I've never seen that issue at another big club, though. If that's what we're calling ourselves, if we still think we're a big club, I mean, do you really? I mean, I can't imagine the Chelsea players, like a Conte or a Hazard saying, "Oh, well, Antonio Conte is not really doing his job to motivate us, so we'll just take it from here." I think you need to go in with the expectation that your manager's voice can still reach you. Now, I guess it gets into a different question of, have the players just tuned him out, or are they too far ingrained into this culture of mediocrity where even if they want to turn it around, they're maybe not necessarily sure how?
I mean, again, it's really difficult to get all the way down to the answer to exactly what it is, There's certainly a culture of that, the word you used was mediocrity.
That might have been harsh, but
but I don't think it is, though. I mean, when's the last time we actually, so we probably could have won the title when Leicester won. But other than that year, when's the last time we really put in a legitimate title challenge?
I mean, you'd have to go back to the year when Eduardo got hurt, I think. Right?
So probably, I mean, I don't recall anything off the top of my head. We're thinking that, we really, mounted a good challenge. But we have had teams where you've looked at the talent level on it going into the season. We said, yeah, absolutely, this squad should compete for the title. Now this year, I don't know that it's exactly that. I think when you look at the talent level, City is head and shoulders better than everybody else, and I think we're pretty much on par with Chelsea and Liverpool and Manchester. I think we're kind of in a big group of those teams where we're pretty level on talent. It can one way or another, but for the most part, we're pretty level. So out of that group, what it comes down to is the mentality. And for whatever the reason is, there's a mentality that we don't have to work for it nearly as hard. And there's absolutely no reason that should be there. And sure, some of it's certainly on the manager, but there does come a point in time, and this is really, I think, what I'm trying to say is that there comes a point in time when even if the manager isn't doing the kind of things he needs to do to motivate or to, get players up for a game, where as a professional athlete, you need to be able to flip that switch yourself.
Yeah, I mean, no, I agree with that if you see your manager's not getting you to where you need to go, you try to take on some individual responsibility. I guess kind of where not where the argument goes in circles, but just kind of where my underlying issue is we have a manager who's getting paid like what, 8 or 9 million pounds a year. And if what you're saying is correct, and I don't disagree with you, is he's not getting through to the players. And that is a really disconcerting statement to me. And, the question then becomes, well, I mean, how long has this really been going on for? I mean, some people would say years. Other people would say, no, it's just more of a recent problem. And then we get into some of the kind of technicalities of the issue. But, just looking at the Liverpool game as a whole, I mean, you can get into a lot of the tactical stuff, basically our inability to cope with the press, the fact that Liverpool could have been up 3 or 4 in that first half. Conversely, we probably could have been up more, before Liverpool equalized. But the thing about that game is, like, now you've had 2 games against Liverpool and you've gotten 1 point out of them. And that's one of your direct rivals for top 4. That's really where the issue lies. I mean, yes, each game is worth 3 points, so it's not necessarily that a game against some people would say a game against a top 6 contender is not any bigger than another game. But it is, though, because not only would you take 3 points out of the game, you're making sure another team gets no points. So you have to take advantage of those games, especially when they're at home. So, I was hoping that we'd follow that game up with a better stretch, but really it hasn't been the case, unfortunately. I know we did beat Crystal Palace right after that, 3-2, and that was a good win. Just because Palace is a tough place to go, as you can see by Manchester City getting a draw there over the weekend. But I don't know. I mean, I know we're not really getting into that game because we still have a lot to talk about with West Brom and Chelsea. But what were your kind of thoughts about that game in general?
I mean, I thought it was a difference. I think that. Sorry, it was definitely a pretty good rebound performance for us. I mean, we did a good job getting the job done. It's one of those. Crystal Palace is a side where, especially when you're going into their, going to their home, on the road against them, they're one of those sides that is really difficult to get a good result, and it's not going to be a pretty game, and you're going to have to grind it out to get there. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to take anything away from them. They got it done. They got the result. Muted there.
Sorry, I was sniffling. Just got a little bit of a cold. I was sniffling, wanted to make sure all you people didn't hear about it. But it's one of those things where if another team had gone into Palace and gotten that result, they would have been lauded as saying, "Oh, look at them, a gritty away win, and this and that." So in that sense, it was good. Some of the attacking play was really good. I thought for the most part we had that game under control. But then Palace got that late goal off a set piece, which of course made everything nervy. And It's funny. I was watching that game on my couch. And I was sitting with my fiance, and she looked in my face as I was watching it. And you've probably experienced this at some point too. She said, "Why do you look so unhappy when you watch this team?" And I said, "Honestly, because this club takes years off my life every game I watch, and my blood pressure is significantly higher when I watch this team." I don't know. I'm sure you've had a similar conversation.
Yeah, usually she just shakes her head and walks out of the room and kind of, I don't know why you do this to yourself. So, but it's true though. I mean, we can never, very rarely can we get things done the easy way. And really, when you look at our last chunk of games, it's kind of been the you can say the same thing about every single one of them.
Yeah, I mean, well, we can certainly transition to the West Brom game, and to end that game 1-1, and yes, the penalty. We'll get into that a little bit later. It's still West Brom. They're horrible. Should have been up by more than one. In an ideal world, it wouldn't have come down to that. Yes, it's tough to win an away game. I understand that, and yes, it's hard to legislate for Mike Dean's incompetence, and
it's impossible to legislate for that.
So I get that, but just a team that's chasing top four, you'd think you could create a little bit more than just scoring off a deflected is a tough word. Deflected free kick. I don't know if you watched that game with as much frustration as I did with the general attacking play and how slow it was.
Yeah, I don't think I'm trying to even remember. I don't think I watched that entire thing. It was one of those where I had some other stuff going on, so I was kind of half paying attention to it because I was doing other things, and partially because it was a game that just didn't grab your attention. I mean, if I had something like that going on for the Liverpool game and the Chelsea game, I would end up, just watching the game would have been tuned in. Yeah, it's disappointing with the results. Disappointing. The penalty call against us was disappointing, but in no way should we have been in a position where we put it in Mike Dean's hands to make a decision that could take 2 points away from us. That's a team where, and yeah, it's hard to win on the road, but not there. It's not hard to win there. So the fact that we are even in that position is really the most frustrating thing about it for me, more so than the actual penalty call.
Yeah, I mean, I know some of the bigger teams have had some struggles there, but West Brom really posed us no threat all game. And we had the lion's share of possession, but I can't remember many clear-cut chances, honestly. Not off the top of my head. I mean, I can't think of that many, and that's kind of the frustrating thing. If it was one of those games where we had like 2 shots hit the post and like the keeper had like a wonder game, then yeah, maybe you tip your cap and you say, all right, well, it's not great, but it happens. That wasn't the case this time around, and that was kind of the frustrating thing. And again, we'll get into the referee bit because certainly that ties into the Chelsea game as well, and the penalty in that game, and then the potential diving incident and all that. But it's one of those games where West Brom, where you're in the top 4 race, you can't afford to be dropping points like that. You just can't. And now we're in a hole right now. I mean, we're after the Chelsea result, we're 2 points behind Spurs for 5th, 5 points behind Liverpool for 4th, and 7 points behind Chelsea for 3rd. So you're digging a hole in a stretch where you had 2 big games, Liverpool and Chelsea, both at home, and you only got 1 point out of each one. You needed to get 4 out of 6 points with those 2 games, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would quite go. I don't know that I'm going to go as far as saying you needed to get those points. There's a lot of time left, and not a lot, but and maybe this has kind of been my downfall. I've always, over the last couple of years, expected to see Spurs and Liverpool struggle because they don't have squad depth, and they have increased competitive European games, and I've always kind of just been waiting for them to kind of fall off a little bit, but maybe that's because I'm used to us doing that. So I don't know. I mean, we're still relatively close. We should still be able to get it. We can't keep doing what we're doing. We can't keep dropping points at West Brom. We can't be doing that. We have to, I know we've got a game against Bournemouth coming up. We've got to get all the points there, and Swansea and Everton are all kind of games in the somewhat near future. Those are all games that we got to get full points from. I don't think we can afford dropping points to anybody below us from this point on.
The problem with that is
we do that all the time.
We do that all the time. Yeah, that, and if you look at our three toughest games for the rest of the season are Spurs away, United away, City at home. Even at home, I don't think the best I think you're going to get against City is a draw. United away, it's a tough one. I mean, we've had some better luck there recently, but again, it's still United away. Then Spurs away, we struggled last season. I believe we lost that game 2-0. So, you start putting pressure on yourself to have to get results in those games because of the hole you dug. And like you said, the upcoming stretch of games isn't the worst. You mentioned Bournemouth and Swansea and Everton. I mean, ideally you get 9 out of 9 with those. But after the Chelsea game, it's definitely a tough spot, and there is some time left. But I don't necessarily want to fall into the trap of saying, "Oh, well, there's still time to make it up, so we'll be fine." Because you'd think the further we get in Europa, we might start using more of our first team players too. I mean, that's something to consider. And yes, some of our top 4 rivals do have Champions League, but truthfully, I don't see a lot of those teams going very far anyways. So I don't know how much to take that into account, but kind of transitioning to the Chelsea game, just because it's more fresh in our mind. Your takeaways from watching that yesterday? I mean, from a neutral perspective, I would imagine that'd have been a really, really fun game to watch.
Oh, from a neutral perspective, it was incredible. I mean, even as from an Arsenal perspective, I mean, sure. I don't remember the last time I've seen a game, other than stretches of that Liverpool game where both sides were back and forth the way that Chelsea and us were in that game. I mean, that was absolutely incredible. I was watching the replay of the game on my phone last night, and I had to try and stay quiet because my wife was sleeping next to me, and it was incredible. It was the most fun I've had, watching an Arsenal game in a really long time, just for the pure open and exciting play that was back and forth the entire time in that game.
Yeah, it really was back and more so than I predicted, honestly. I kind of thought Chelsea would come and play it a little bit more conservatively, because they played with Bakayoko, Conte, and Fabregas in midfield. They didn't play with 2 in midfield. They really played with 3, and I thought they were trying to kind of shore things up there. And, we went the game with the Xhaka Wilshere midfield, and we'll kind of get into the midfield debate later on. But I had my concerns going into the game, just because of the midfield situation. And then you're playing Chambers and Holding at center back. You didn't have Koscielny available. And then, we played Maitland-Niles at left wing back. I definitely had some concerns because you didn't have Monreal, you didn't have Kolasinac, you didn't have Ramsey. There's a lot of key players not available for Arsenal. But really open game. And honestly, we dominated the first half, I thought. We had that chance where Alexis hit the post. Well, I shouldn't say that. It was saved by Courtois off the post, hit the other post. Somehow that didn't go in. And I do think if that had gone in, maybe the complexion of the game would have changed a little bit just because Chelsea would have had to chase it a little more. At the same time, Chelsea could argue that Morata had 5 or 6 golden chances when all that Chelsea really had to do was hit it route 1 over the top. Chambers was lost in no man's land. Mustafi was pointing and no one in particular. and Holding was kind of out of position as well. And on a better day, because I think Marat's is a really good striker, on a better day he could have had 3 or 4 goals. Honestly, I mean, what the defense must have scared you shitless, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't really know how else you can. I think you put it as well as anybody could. I mean, Chambers was lost the entire time. Mustafi was his typical self, where his typical inconsistent self, where he makes a great play, but then makes just a mind-blowing error. Holding, I think, was better than the other two, but it's not necessarily saying much. I don't think he had as much to do in the first half. So he kind of, like I said, he didn't have as much to do, so you didn't notice him as much. I think as far as the game, it's the way it started off. Chelsea definitely tried to sit back a little bit. They tried to kind of absorb a little bit of the pressure. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what happened that brought them out of their shell. But at some point in time, I want to say kind of the latter half of the first half, they kind of gave up on the sitting back thing and really started to see the game open up from there. But I was really happy to see Chelsea sit back because they cut through our defense like nothing when they did go forward. So I was like, you guys can sit back as long as you want. I don't want to deal with that attack right now.
Yeah, although, I mean, I guess the flip of that is like, oh, well, on the counter, they're just going to slice us apart. You just lump it up to Hazard and then watch everything go to shit.
Watch
right
him
after.
go one-on-one against Chambers.
Oh, my God. I literally, every time Hazard got the ball one-on-one with Chambers, like a little part of me died. And it was terrifying. I mean, on the flip side, a lot of the attacking
It must have been terrifying for him.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I can't even imagine. No, I'm thinking about it from Chambers' perspective. He's probably thinking, oh, my God, not again,
Yeah, right.
And the problem was that Bellerin pushes up the pitch so high that, to get involved in the attack, that any ball over the top towards the right-sided center back is going to cause problems.
One thing while you're on that point, and I think Bill would probably disown me when he hears what I'm about to say. The commentators, I don't remember who the hell it was, whatever the color commentator, whoever it was, made a really, really good point. Goes along with what you were just saying. He said far too often when Arsenal are in possession of the ball, both the wing backs go bombing forward way too early, leaving way too much ground for the 3 center backs to try and cover. He also kind of talked about how that affects space for our forwards getting in behind, which I thought was a really good point as well, because it pushes Chelsea's wingbacks back. But the point about, Bellerin pushing too high too early, absolutely. That's, I had to kind of say that for all the crap we give commentators, that every once in a while they do get something right.
I think I'm glad you brought that up. I think it was Lee Dixon who said that, which makes sense. A guy played fullback. I think he understands.
Yeah.
And you wonder if the Bellerin thing, is that a tactical thing, or is it just he has so much confidence in his attacking ability? I would tend to think it's a tactical choice, which kind of makes it all the more confusing. I understand Hector gives you something sometimes in the attacking third, not a lot recently, but sometimes, although we'll get into his goal later on. He does give you that, but oftentimes it's not worth the space that you leave behind, especially not with Chambers back there. If it was Mustafi playing as a right-sided center back and then you had Koscielny playing in the middle, you feel a little more confident in that situation because you have guys that are a little bit more experienced in how to deal with those situations. I mean, Chambers started this is like his second or third start in a row after not starting for Arsenal for almost a year or something like that, more than a year.
Something like that, yeah.
Right, because he was on loan at Middlesbrough last season. So, his first league starts for Arsenal in a long time. It felt really naive to me. Certainly the attacking play at times was a lot of fun. The interplay between Lacazette, Ozil, Alexis, and for you and I, being big Mesut Ozil fans, I'd have to say the last few months have been a joy to watch from that perspective, because he's just been on point in terms of dictating the tempo of a game, dropping deep when he needs to, also finding the space in midfield between the center backs. and the defensive midfield. They're kind of picking the ball up there and linking the attack. I mean, it's just been a lot of fun to watch, and that's something I definitely took out of that game as well.
Yeah, that was one of, I think, the most interesting things tactically that I picked up in that game. And I don't know if it's been going on more recently. I watched this game a lot more in depth than I have a lot of the other ones. But one of the things that you notice, and it almost looked like we inverted that front three triangle, if you will. You know, instead of it being a 3-4-3, think of it, we kind of played a 3-4-2-1 previously. But to me, it looked like we kind of inverted that and pushed Alexis up top with Lacazette and dropped Ozil into the number 10 role behind them, because he had the epitome of a free role in a free reign wherever he wanted to go in that game. How many times did you see him come back deeper than Wilshere into the center circle to get the ball from the center backs? You know, I don't know that, you know, when previously when we've been playing the 3-4-3, when he's kind of been off on the right a little bit, I don't know that we've seen him get that involved earlier on in the play. He's made it, you know, especially in the Chelsea game, made it, whether it was a tactical decision from Arsene Wenger, and I think we can debate that, whether he does do does much tactical changes like that. Whether it's that or Ozil just has kind of said, you know what, somebody needs to put this team on their shoulders, and decided to do it. But I think that was one of the biggest, most positive things about that game is, you know, the impact that he was having on it, and the number of touches, and in the variety of places that he had those touches. I mean, he was picking up the ball on top of our own 18 and dribbling up the field. I mean, how often, you know, we haven't seen him do that all that often.
At least not on a consistent basis throughout the game. Like, this wasn't just once or twice he did that. It was at least 5 or 6 different times that we saw him pick the ball up in that area where you're saying top of the 18, and other times even at the base of midfield. You know, I don't know how much of that was down to the midfield and maybe us not being able to have the control we wanted. You know, Jack had his moments. I thought Xhaka struggled a little bit. You know, I know that, you know, that he's been kind of a topic of discussion lately, but, you know, I mean, I'd be curious to kind of get your main takeaways from that Chelsea game in terms of, like, maybe the best things you saw, maybe the 3 best things you saw, and then maybe some of the areas of concern that you saw. I know we've kind of delved into it a little bit, but there was a lot to talk about from that game, so there's no absence of material.
Absolutely. And I think for me, probably, you know, the thing I like the most, I was just talking about it, Mesut Ozil. There's really no doubt about that for me, that that was probably my number one positive from that game. Just the impact that he had on the game from start to finish. And I just said it, where he's getting his touches, what he was doing with his touches, everything like that. You know, another one that you mentioned earlier, Maitland-Niles. He's really starting to, you know, I'm hoping he's starting to kind of take a more consistent role in the squad. I'm not saying he's already locked down a starting spot, but he's certainly showing that he's got a hell of a future in front of him. And I think another positive for me, and I think it's where one of the things we may differ on, is I liked what I saw out of Jack Wilshere. You know, I think that, you know, his game wasn't perfect, but I thought that there were a lot of really positive signs. And I would definitely put him down, you know, his performance down as one of my top 3 things from that game, as far as from an Arsenal perspective.
And what about maybe your top 3, or bottom 3, I should say, maybe your bottom 3 negatives?
Can I say Mustafi, Chambers, and Holding? I just chalk it right up to them.
See, easy enough, right?
the individual players, yeah, those are the three. The things I didn't like from an Arsenal perspective, other than, those three guys, I think Lacazette looks like he's lacking in some confidence right now. He's kind of taking an extra half step to get the ball off of his foot. There was a one chance where he had an opportunity at goal and just couldn't get his feet sorted out. And then at that point in time, Courtois had come out and cut off the angle. So I think if I had to, give you something other than us defensively, it would probably be where his game's at right now.
Yeah, I think for me, my number one positive has to be Maitland-Niles. And yes, people are going to say, oh, well, he gave up the cross that led to the 2-1.
Yeah, but Mustafi needs to know that there's somebody running.
I think that was on Mustafi, because I think that was one of the few times a wide player got past Maitland-Niles to put a cross in. Every other time he was cutting those out, deflecting them. He just got turned by a fresh player, because let's not forget, Zappacosta came on late in that game and was fresh, put the ball in. Mustafi fell asleep, and Alonso got in front of him, and there's no excuse for that. I would put that more on Mustafi not being aware of his surroundings in that situation. So I thought Maitland-Niles in general got forward really well, almost had a penalty earlier in the first half. He looked really calm. He really knew when to pick his spots, when to get forward. He's very athletic. His passing range is fantastic, for a kid his age. Second, I would I'd put Ozil. So I think I just flipped 1 and 2 from what you said. I thought Ozil's performance was really, really encouraging in that respect. Like we said, picking up the ball, making things happen, and kind of dispelling this narrative of, oh, what does Ozil do in big games? Not enough passion, desire. Where's the fight? Where's the heart? That's my idea.
Well, he showed it here.
Yeah, also that was my British accent. And I don't believe that anyone could have figured that out. So I figured I'd better explain it. I turned into like Crocodile Dundee midway through that. And then the third thing, I would probably say I might differ with you on Lacazette, honestly. I know that his finishing hasn't looked good, but I think his movement and his hold-up play and him getting involved in the build-up has been a lot better than I expected at this stage coming into a new league. He's not the size matters, obviously, but he's like, 5'8", something like that, 5'9", but he mixes it up in there, but at the same time, he drops deep. His movement creates spaces for Alexis to cut in behind, and kind of what you said with like the 3-4-1-2, where Ozil is playing more of a traditional 10 role, and then Alexis and Lacazette really played more of a strike pairing. I thought that was encouraging. As far as my negatives, the fact that I have no faith in Petr Cech to ever save a penalty, ever.
Not even close, ever.
Not even. I don't even know why he bothers. He may as well just move and just let the person score, and that way I can save myself the 1% of hope that he might stop one day. The defensive positioning was just such a clusterfuck. Watching Chambers push up and then somehow get surprised when the ball went over his head over and over and over and over again. I don't know if that was a tactical choice, if we wanted to play a high line. If it was, let's not do that again against a team with that kind of electric pace on the break. And then the third thing was probably Granit Xhaka. Something looks really off with him lately. Last season, he looked more assertive. He was playing those balls through the lines and those crossfield passes. He was hitting them with a lot more purpose. He seemed to read the game better. I know he got some cards last season, but I think overall he looked way more confident. This season, there's a lot of loose touches. He receives the ball a lot of the times with his back to the defenders. So he doesn't necessarily see that he's about to be pressed, and he's too stiff and immobile to really maneuver his hips, twist his hips one way, go the other way, or create space for himself. I think that's a concern for me. And I figure we're talking midfield. Let's just kind of get right into it. You mentioned Jack, and I thought he was good. I'm not going to bash on Jack. I like Jack. I want him to do well. I know he's never going to be the player he could have been if all those injuries hadn't happened with the burst that he lost. But Ramsey's been out. Cynics would say, well, look, Ramsey went out. Look at how the results have gone since then. Yeah, that's what some people would say. Others would say, well, no, it's the crowded fixture list, and all of a sudden you're throwing Wilshere back after having not started Premier League games for Arsenal in a long time. The Ramsey-Jack debate, I mean, I still think Ramsey fits what we do better, although the Xhaka-Ramsey partnership hasn't gelled like I thought it would. For me, and I'd be curious to get your take on this, I don't think it's a one or the other. I think you have to find a way to get them both in there if possible, when healthy, I should say. I don't know if you do a Ramsey, Wilshere, Xhaka. I don't know if you do a diamond with Ozil at the top of the diamond. I don't know if you squeeze Maitland-Niles. Just break this midfield situation down for us, because I'm at a loss.
Well, that's the thing. You mentioned the Ramsey-Xhaka pairing and how it hasn't really gelled, and I think part of that is Ramsey is so good at getting forward and so willing to get forward into the box that does leave Xhaka a lot more exposed. Jack doesn't make those quite as often, not nearly as often as Ramsey does. It doesn't make those runs forward into the box. He will push forward a bit, but not to the point where it leaves Xhaka isolated against the counter all that often. So I think defensively, the balance that you get out of Xhaka and Wilshere works better than the balance you get with Xhaka and Ramsey. Now, part of the problem is that Xhaka, like you said, has really been MIA this season. I don't know what it is, but he hasn't been nearly as effective as we need him to be in there. So that's a big problem. But one of the things that I did like, and I think it helped as far as the center of the pitch in the Chelsea game, was Ozil dropping into that spot, because he was really playing a central midfield position. He wasn't playing a third forward. Just based on the positioning and where he was getting on the ball. I mean, he's never going to, win a bunch of tackles in there or track back, but he was involved defensively. He wasn't hanging up top. So, I suppose that could be another reason for the balance looking better with Xhaka and Jack, because they did have a little bit of help from Ozil in there. But it's a tricky thing, right? I mean, I don't necessarily know that Xhaka is such a good, a defensive, deep-lying midfielder that you got to keep him in there. But I don't know that you want Jack handling that defensive midfield type role, right? I mean, he's had so many problems with injuries. I think the goal is to keep him out of as many tackles as possible. So right now, Xhaka is still the guy that he still has to anchor that spot, unless you want to move Maitland-Niles into that spot. But if you move him inside, you lose a lot of his explosiveness outside. It's a difficult thing because, like I said, we don't have that holding midfield, that defensive midfield spot like Chelsea has in Conte, for example. Somebody who is going to put the work in, get in on tackles, break plays up. We don't have the one player that can do all of that. So the idea is you really have to find the best combination of everybody to kind of piece that together. And I think when Xhaka and Ramsey are in that midfield together, we get too exposed because we don't have enough of the defensive side. Xhaka Jack works if Ozil is dropping deeper to connect the midfield to the strikers. If he's going to be, caught up as a third forward, then we're going to get exposed there again. We're not going to have that connection, I don't think, between the midfield and the striker. So it's a really delicate balance. It's a really difficult balance. And honestly, I don't know. It's hard to, do I think that Ramsey and Wilshere are better than Xhaka as players? Yes, I do. Based on ability and talent alone, as being just, if you rated them on a 1 to 100 scale, like FIFA, for example, I think they're both higher rated players than Xhaka. But to fit them into a balance of a team is really difficult in our current setup. And even if we were to go to a 4-3-3, or, it's a tricky thing.
Yeah, I mean, and I've been a big Jaka defender. I mean, I've gotten in countless Twitter wars, and I'm currently blocked by John Bruin, who was formerly at ESPN, about some of his comments about Jaka, and because I thought towards the end of last season Jaka really came along, and the problem with Jaka, I think he's a really good player in certain kinds of systems in really balanced midfields. The problem is we don't have a manager who can build a balanced midfield. I think our manager kind of sticks players together and just says, hey, let's see if this works. Let's see if that works. When you saw Xhaka at his best at Borussia Mönchengladbach, was with Dahoud in midfield, and they had a really good understanding of positional discipline. Xhaka would sit deep and Dahoud would press forward. And then when Xhaka needed to play make, Dahoud would kind of sit back and play that more disciplined role. Now, maybe you mentioned maybe Jack can do that. I think Jack's lack of explosiveness and recovery pace really hurts in that respect. And you could see there were times yesterday where Conte was running right past him or Hazard was running right past him and he'd have to reach out. And that's kind of what led to his first yellow card, is that just he was out of position and couldn't really recover in terms of his speed. And, I know his game is predicated on close control and neat touches and driving forward. But, he did have a few loose touches yesterday, and, his goal was certainly well taken. And I was excited to see that for him, but I don't know if he's the answer just yet. I need to see him stay fit for more than 2 months, honestly, before I can really get too hyped about him. I think, and going back to something I said earlier about how the Ramsey-Xhaka partnership hasn't worked, in my mind, I thought it would work a lot like Ramsey-Arteta in 2013 to 2014. I really thought that was kind of the role they would have. For whatever reason, it hasn't worked like that. I don't know if it's the three-man back line, playing with the back three with the two wing backs. I don't know if that's something to do with it. Or maybe Xhaka's just not cut out for that role. Maybe Arteta was more disciplined than we gave him credit for.
I think you hit it right there. I think Arteta, the way that he saw and thought the game was a step above, honestly, anybody else in that team, in that side when he was, those years. I think that like I said, his ability to read the game and be in the right positions is just something that Xhaka doesn't have. Arteta was almost never out of position. Hang on a second. You still got me there?
No, yeah, I got you.
Okay. My whole screen just went black. All right, we're back. Okay, cool. I freaked out there for a second. Yeah. So essentially, I just don't think that Xhaka has the mental capacity to, as far as the game, to do what Arteta did for us.
At least not at this stage in his career. I really think in a three-man midfield he could work. I would love to see him and Maitland-Niles playing in center midfield with Ramsey ahead of them, because that way you have Maitland-Niles, who's a really athletic, dynamic player with a good passing range, very technically skilled, but also with the recovery pace to help Xhaka. And then you put Ramsey in a position where he can push forward a little more, and so you don't look at it as him abandoning his defensive responsibility. Because in order to get you're in a tough spot, because in order to get the best out of Ramsey, he needs to be pushed higher up. In order to get the best out of Xhaka, he needs a disciplined player near him.
And you can't get both of those and get the best out of Mesut Ozil.
Exactly. So it's something I've said before. I feel like this team's a lot of disjoint pieces that are really good individually, but disjointed together. You can even look at kind of how we play in the back. I don't think Koscielny and Mustafi, I don't think their games necessarily complement each other very well, even when they're paired together as a back two, because they both kind of rely on recovery pace. And I think in hindsight, looking back on it, maybe that's why the Pair-Koscielny partnership worked well at times. Pair was the guy who read the game but didn't have the physical ability. Koscielny had that when he was healthier too. He had that ability to read the game and kind of, I mean, not read the game, sorry, kind of make up for his lack of reading the game with his physical attributes. So it's just a mishmash of pieces. I would like to see Maitland-Niles get a run, though, because I don't think anyone has cemented their spot. I mean, Coughlin has gotten, I think I read Tim Stillman said that Coughlin's gotten like 15 minutes of play during like the Christmas fixture congested period. El Neni's gotten 0 minutes or something close, something like that. So clearly Wenger doesn't see those guys as assets at this point, at least not in the games that matter. So why not go with Maitland-Niles? Honestly, like as soon as Kolasinac gets fit, I think you put Kolasinac back at left wing back or left back, whatever formation we're playing, and then see what Maitland-Niles can do in midfield. I don't know. Am I crazy? Am I putting too much pressure on the kid?
No, I mean, I would certainly love to see it too. Definitely would like to see him in there. But again, you still fall into that problem of, if you do that and you have a healthy Ramsey, I'm assuming you're saying you play Xhaka in there. If you do that, you're pushing Mesut Ozil out of his best spot, and you're pushing him back up to a wide forward type of wing role. And honestly, I would rather get the best out of Mesut Ozil than the best out of Granit Xhaka. I wonder if it's kind of another question, and it may be crazy, kind of like you said. Can Maitland-Niles, is he capable of playing that N'Golo Kante-esque role? I don't know. I don't know if anybody does. But I would certainly like to see if he could do it. I mean, it's kind of, he has all the physical attributes to do it.
He does, and I mean, I don't think he's like a Conte type player. I think he's more dynamic than Conte.
Absolutely.
But at least in terms of having the discipline in midfield, I think that is certainly something I'd like to see. And it's also a question of like what we're doing is not consistently working. Like, let's be honest. If we had a formula that was working, and I'll throw this back to when Leicester won the title. They had Drinkwater and Conte play midfield every single game, and they never changed it up. Why? Because it was working. You don't change something that's working. So if we were doing that, I'd understand it. But we're not having those kinds of results, and so I don't see what you lose by trying someone else who down the line can really be that player, especially because, in my opinion, I think Arsene Wenger leaves after this season. Why not develop someone who will have the requisite game time in midfield to then be ready when a new manager comes in and this new manager says, "Hey, I've seen you play in midfield. You might have something I can work with here."
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of where it's headed as far as Maitland-Niles getting moved more centrally. He's been getting more time, and sure, you could say it's because Kolasinac has been out, and that's sure it has something to do with it. But the performance he's put in, they're to a point where he's earned more responsibility. He's earned more game time, even as guys get fit. And like you said, what we're doing right now, it's not like it's working. I mean, if the two of us can sit here and pick apart what's wrong with Arsenal's midfield, I mean, guys like Pochettino and Conte and shit, I'll give even Mourinho, guys like that are gonna be able to do that a hell of a lot better than we can.
And it makes us really easy to play against too. And
that's always been it for one reason or another. I mean, that's goes back to the beginning of our podcast. It's typical Arsenal.
Yeah, I don't even think it's the beginning of our podcast. I think it's beginning of
like the podcast.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I was like, since we started this,
not just this episode,
we've had that discussion. And kind of transitioning to something that I also feel is typical Arsenal. It is, and I know you and I have differing opinions on this. It's refereeing, and referees this season have, in my opinion, been a direct cause of a lot of the points we've dropped. And I know the common theme is, it evens out over time. I mean, talk me off the ledge here, man. Help me believe that there's not something strange going on with referees.
I mean, I don't know that I can. I generally am somebody that does not like to put a lot of blame on the referees. I mean, there's always going to be that human element to the game. So one of the things that, the only thing that you can do to, protect yourself against that is by putting yourself in a position where it doesn't really matter. I mean, against Chelsea, that for me is probably the most egregious one, because it's Chelsea. I mean, what are you going to be up 4-0 where if they give a penalty to Chelsea, it's not going to impact the game at all? I mean, you can't. That's a lot to ask, right? So when you're in a game like that, I mean, that penalty for me was absolutely embarrassing that it was given. I mean, first of all, yeah, was there a little bit of contact? Yes, there was, but it was on the back of Hazard's heel, and he went down holding his shin. So that for me it was absolutely embarrassing. And they showed the replay, and the ref was 10, 15 yards away. That's the biggest thing for me. Out of the biggest, all the issues that we've had so far this year. West Ham, don't put yourself in that position. That's a team that you should be clear of and not leaving it up to that. In general, yes, refereeing decisions are going to balance out. But for some reason, it does seem like we're always on the short end of it all. In our case, it doesn't balance out.
That's what I want to get into. I don't know if you follow El Spanish Gunner on Twitter. He's basically been posting how many points have potentially been lost and gained due to favorable or unfavorable decisions. So there was a penalty we got against Burnley, and it got a lot of outcry saying that we shouldn't have gotten it. But even Sean Dyche, the Burnley manager, said, yes, it was a penalty, but it shouldn't have been given. In that case, you can't say it was controversial because the right call was made. Against Spurs, yeah, Mustafi was offside for the headed goal. That gave us the first. We won that game 2-0. Maybe you argue that we wouldn't have won that game if not for that. I mean, I don't know. So, okay, let's say that was the case. Let's even say that Wilshere should have gotten a second yellow for a dive. First of all, in my opinion, it wasn't a dive because Dele Alli does that. Jamie Vardy does that. Eden Hazard does that. Every single Manchester United player does that, where they kind of leave their trailing leg there to initiate some contact. When those players do it, it's called clever play. When Wilshere does, being crafty and that little bit extra heart and passion, and it's just
Braveheart. Not really an English accent.
Not at all. I'm gonna stop with the accents now. But basically, it's chalked up as nothing big when they do it, or it's even rewarded. For us, it literally was like on ESPN FC, they were saying it was a dive, and then Gary Neville's Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville said it was cheating and this and that. So somehow when an Arsenal player does it, it's a huge deal. When other clubs do it, it's not. So let's even assume those calls went in our favor. Okay, well, let's go back to someone at the beginning of the season. Watford away. Troy Deeney's offside when they score their equalizer. Richarlison dives to get the penalty. And then you look at the game against Stoke. Lacazette, everyone has shown that clip when his little toe might have been a millimeter offside, but they've shown that clip when the ball had already been released. When you actually look at when the ball hits the player who passed it to him, when they hit their foot, he's level. That would have equalized that game. You look at against Manchester City, 2-1. We were coming back into that game. All of a sudden, David Silva was 5 yards offside. That was given to him. West Brom, that's never handball. Mike Dean is a corrupt referee. There's no other explanation. no one on the West Ham sideline. I mean, sorry, West Brom, not West Ham, West Brom. All the West blend together.
Yeah. Well,
no one on the West Brom sideline called that to be a penalty until Mike Dean signaled for it. Gibbs was literally going out to take the corner or to pick the ball up for a corner. At no situation is that a handball. And yes, I hear what you're saying, that like you should have put it to bed at that point. But like, it's not like you're playing a high school team, or it's not like you're playing a college team. These are still professional footballers. To just say, oh, well, the referees are, completely incompetent, so you need to be up 3 or 4-0 just so it doesn't matter. It doesn't work like that. You can't really flip a switch. And I'm just not seeing these calls even out. And now Arsene Wenger, and I think he could have gone in way harder for starters, especially about Mike Dean. Apparently he called him a fucking cheat in the locker room, which I think is great, and I would love to have seen him punch him out, but that's a different story. So Arsene Wenger, is potentially facing a ban, and it's turned into this thing where now the media is saying, oh, it's a conspiracy, Arsene with his conspiracy theories. But just watch what's happened. Watch the results. How many important results are being dictated by referees? Like, look at the Spurs game yesterday. Not yesterday, sorry, today. When did they play Swansea? Whenever that was, Llorente was at least a yard offside for his goal. I guess it was 2 days ago. Sorry, Llorente was offside for his goal, and not a word about it. So these decisions are are influence the results of games, and that's going to change the top 4 race. I mean, I know I sound like a really angry refs are the blame for everything. No, trust me. I know the team digs a lot of its own holes, but I'm just saying, for professional referees, the amount of mistakes that are being made, if they are mistakes, it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, and that's the big thing right there. I mean, there's absolutely no excuse for the mistakes and the calls that are being made and missed. And there's absolutely no doubt that they are having an impact on the results. I mean, when I first started reffing games, one of the things that I was always told and taught was, you've done a good job as a ref if you haven't influenced the outcome of the game, if people haven't noticed you. And it's almost like the refs in the Premier League now are trying to make a name for themselves. They're making calls that they know are going to be controversial. They know they're going to get their name out there and get them talked about. I mean, what did what's his nuts? That's not reffing the Premier League anymore. Thank you. And he even kind of said it. He wrote a book, and he's in, well, I don't know where the hell he's reffing now, but he's making a crap ton of money doing it. And he even kind of said something along those lines where, he kind of talked about it being a show. I don't remember the exact quote, and I know I'm not, I don't have time to look it up, but his what he said about it really kind of lended to that theory that these refs are, they're kind of in it for themselves. They're trying to make the show about them, and who better to, again, now I'm sounding like a conspiracy nut here, but who better to call things against than Arsenal? Because what other team has the kind of social media outcry that you get when you do something involving Arsenal?
I think there's something.
I mean, that's like think about it. How long ago was it that Mike Dean made that handball call?
What, the game was on Sunday, right? Sunday or Monday?
Was it Sunday?
I have no idea what day it is today.
Whenever it was, we're still talking about his name. We're still talking about it. And what happens every single time somebody talks about that call? They say his name. Doesn't matter. His name's out there. So now what's going to happen? He's going to hang up the reffing boots, and you're one of the more controversial refs we've ever had in the Premier League. How about you write a book about it? There you go. More money. They're marketing themselves, and who better to market yourself with than Arsenal, because we're crazy fans.
And it's funny you mention Mark Clattenburg. I think that's a really good point you brought up. Like, And to your point, it wasn't just that he said that like it's a show. It's like he said that referees often take like they're looking at the occasion more than what's actually happening. Like he was talking about that Tottenham Chelsea game from like 2 years ago when Tottenham was just like going full out, like balls to the wall. Every tackle was like should have been a red card, honestly. Yeah. And he's like, oh well, I didn't want to send it off because I didn't want to become the story or something to that effect, or I didn't want to like, I didn't want the title race to be affected. No, make the right call. It's really that simple. Like, don't pick and choose your moments because of what team is in it or what team's not. Make the right call. And I'll be the first to admit if a referee gets a call against my team correct, like I acknowledge like that Mustafi goal against Spurs, he probably was offside, but because of how many offside goals or have been given against us or some of our goals wrongly called offside, I'm not going to feel bad because one went our way. I mean, the Hector play against Hazard, I mean, two players going for the ball. And what people don't get, just because there's contact doesn't mean it's a foul. Contact doesn't equal foul. Like there has to be some sort of motion or some sort of like impediment, not impediment, that's not a word, some sort of impediment to what the player is trying to do. And that I don't feel like that happened in that instance. Hector is making a play for the ball. He barely touched Hazard's heel, and then Hazard goes down grabbing his shin. His shin wasn't touched, so I'm not sure why. And if you're going to call that, then why not call the penalty for Maitland-Niles earlier? Yes, Maitland-Niles, like the last thing you saw was him tripping over his own foot. He tripped over his own foot because he lost his balance because his heel clipped Moses. Like, where do you draw the line in terms of that? Like, how do you say one's a penalty and one's not? I mean, the Mike Dean thing, and I'm not going to stay on him for too long, but Garth Crooks, the pundit in England, said something about Mike Dean a couple of years ago, and I kind of want to rehash it. He said, Mike Dean he's a good referee, but he's got one problem. He wants to be the star of the show. And in a lot of these instances, if that call had been made, no one would have made a sound. And like he treats the players like children. He's arrogant, and he wants to be the star of the show. And people are showing up to watch football matches. They're not showing up to see a referee. Arsenal has the highest season ticket prices in the league, don't they? I'm not going to pay that kind of money to come watch Mike Dean fuck it up because he doesn't get enough attention at home because he looks like a fucking gremlin. It's ludicrous to me that is the story. We're talking about some ugly referee rather than the football being played on the pitch. And it's just going to keep happening because, like you said, they know they can get a rise out of Arsenal fans. So even if these referees go into these games with someone of an open mind, if they rule against Arsenal, they're not too upset because they know, hey, people talk about me. And it's funny, every time a referee list comes out of who's reffing that week's games, almost every name I see, I think, well, fuck, that sucks. The only name I see on there that I don't feel bad is Michael Oliver. That's the only referee in the league that when I see his name when he's going to call the game, I'm like, okay, you know what? At least he doesn't get influenced by the crowd. He doesn't get influenced by diving. He's the best referee in the league. I can't say that about any of the other refs. I know I went on a long ref tangent, but it just, because of how many decisions have gone against us in recent games, I think it's absolutely worth discussing. And I mean, I guess with Arsene Wenger's reaction, would you have said something different than he did?
Probably. I wouldn't have been quite as, what's the word I'm looking for here? I wouldn't have waited for the referee lock to talk to him in the tunnel or in the locker room. Let's put it that way. There's no way. He wouldn't have made it down the tunnel without getting an earful from me. So. Yeah,
and I actually admire how much he kept his cool. I got to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's especially when you see, everything does add up. If that was the only time that this has happened to us all year, or one of the only times that it happened to us, you know what? It probably wouldn't have been much of anything. Arsene would have said something to him as he walked by going into the tunnel, and that would have been it. But because this happens on such a regular, it happens so often that, he's got to be getting sick and tired of it.
Oh, absolutely. And he's really tried to take the high road at so many different levels. And I feel bad for him. I mean, he causes a lot of his own problems, let's be clear. I don't want it to seem like I'm an Arsene Wenger defender, because I'm not. I want him gone. But on this issue, I don't think he's wrong. I know we're kind of trying to wrap up, but I do want to get into one thing since we're talking about Arsene Wenger. And I tweeted this out earlier, and I kind of want to get your take on it. I said, you don't have to be an Arsene Wenger defender to kind of at least be excited about the fact that we now have a head scout that is identifying young talent and we're going to call him a director of football. Like, let's just call him what he is, that can close these deals. And if you don't know what I'm referring to, Arsenal today sealed the deal for Konstantinos Mavropanos. He is a center back from PAS Giannina in the Greek league. 20 years old, seems to be very highly rated by Greek scouts, and he was identified by, and I've been practicing this, Sven Mislintat, the new head scout for Arsenal. I think he's getting loaned to Werder Bremen. That's the rumor, and get some game time before he comes back in the summer. What are your thoughts on the signing, and more importantly, like kind of what it indicates about the club's direction?
Well, I think that's kind of, as far as the direction of it. I mean, I know I talked about it before. That's when I made the prediction that I think this was going to be Wenger's last season, because they are starting to put the pieces in place to help guide the club when he does step down. As far as the scout, I'm not trying to say his name because you did it really well, so we're just going to leave it at that. I think we're going to see a lot more signings like this. And one of the craziest things to me was seeing people go nuts about, well, I've never heard of this kid. Who the hell is he? Why are we signing a 20-year-old that nobody's ever heard of? Like, well, you're the same people that were just complaining that how come we don't sign players, like we don't sign Mbappe before he becomes superstar Mbappe. You can't sign the player before he becomes the next big thing before he gets there if you don't sign him before he gets there. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's awesome. It's something that I've been kind of really, wanting Arsenal to do. I mean, when's the last time we went out and really bought a youth player? Whether he's an 18, 19, 20-year-old. I mean, we did that with Holding. We kind of did that with Chambers. He was still Oxlade-Chamberlain. I mean, but the thing about that is they're all English. And no offense to the English, but your national team hasn't exactly been
good,
incredible. and don't get me wrong, our national team's not in the World Cup. So enjoy the World Cup. So, I mean, this is where we're coming from. So, you can't. I just figured I'd throw that in there before we got the response later. So now they can't say it. Haha. But I've been crying for that. Like, go and sign these players. Get these German kids or these Spanish kids. Like, get the French players. I mean, look at all these good, young, talented players that we just don't ever seem to bring through. Well, it's because we're not signing them.
And the thing is, I think we got Konstantinos for like 2.2 million euros.
Something like that, yeah.
You're going to have to take a lot of punts on guys. Like, that's just the new way of the world, because we're not going to sign the 70 or 80 or 90 million pound player. So you will need to take some shots on these 19, 20-year-old players, especially at the center back position, because if one of those guys pans out, even if you have to sell him, at the very least, you make a big profit on him. And if you don't have to sell him, you have your center back for the next 10, 12 years, So you got to take your chances on these guys, because we're never going to, once Mbappe became Mbappe, we were never going to be able to sign him, or even looking back like 8 years or so, not years, like 5 or 6 years ago, like when Hazard was at Lille. I know Wenger had been scouting him for a long time, but then once Hazard had his big year at Lille, Chelsea and clubs like that were the only ones who were going to be able to sign him. Or same with Mario Götze at Borussia Dortmund. He was a player that we tracked, but we didn't act on it. And when we didn't act on it, eventually he had a big season and we couldn't sign him. So you have to take a few chances like that. Yeah, a few of these guys aren't going to pan out, but
probably the majority even.
Yeah, but even if you have a 20% hit rate, if that one guy becomes a regular starter and you've spent 15 to 20 million on 5 different young players, that's not so bad. That's just the way that the market's going to work right now, honestly.
Yeah, it's the way you have to do it. It really is, because just like you said, once they have that big season, we're never going to get them because we can't compete with, Chelsea and City and Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, PSG. The usuals. Those are that when Mbappe becomes Mbappe and breaks onto the scene, then there's no chance. So I think it's a great sign for the club. It's exactly like you said. We need to structure our club as far as bringing players in, similar to what you see Borussia Dortmund doing. That's kind of along the lines of what we need to do. We need to find the guys while they're young and then bring them into the team. And if you got to sell them a little bit later on, like you said, you make a hell of a profit. And then every once in a while, you can go out there and buy Mesut Ozil or buy an Alexis Sanchez. But the majority of your players have to either come through your own academy or you have to get them when they're young and cheap. That's just the way of world football right now. If you're not one of the top 6 clubs as far as money, that's how you have to do it if you want to compete.
Yeah, you're not going to be competing with Manchester City to sign players. Let's just call a spade a spade. That's the reality of the situation. So that's it's not a big name in terms of who we brought in, but I'm hoping it's indicative of what we're going to do. Take some chances on young guys, see what they pan out. And at least we have a structure in place now where once Arsene Wenger leaves, and I'm hoping that's after this season, we have guys in place, or at least a scouting network of targets in place that we're going to act on as soon as we appoint a new manager, which I'm, in an ideal world would be, right before the World Cup. Or so.
Yeah, that's the only. I'd love to wait, but
that thing we're not going to be in. Sorry.
That's the thing. Yeah, and I already brought that up again today. For
no
reason.
But I mean, certainly we'll get into the manager stuff down the line. But I know it's been a little while since we've been on. Certainly been busy time for all of us with the holiday period and wedding planning and all the stuff that I'm dealing with. Certainly you're a very busy man as well. So things will certainly come up, but hopefully the next few weeks of Arsenal will present a little bit more to be positive about. And I know we want to get into a lot of the U.S. issues with the presidential election and some of the, we're going to have the camp cupcake, as they call it, coming up in January, which is always exciting because all you're going to get called up as MLS players because the European and Mexican-based players aren't available. So that's riveting. But it's that time of year for Arsenal fans where the feeling of deja vu, except we might have already dug ourselves a little bit of a hole. So with that ending on that really, really negative note, Ian, got any final words?
Words, no.
The Bills make me wanna shout, kick your heels up and shout, throw your hands up and shout, throw your
That's all I gotta say right there.
Come on.
I love it. Yep. And to all the Bills fans, congratulations. And I sincerely hope you guys take care of business against Jacksonville this weekend. Ian's still dancing in the background. So
Come on.
don't go
Right, we're kind of not.
Okay. No. So that's you know what? If Arsenal ain't gonna do it, I'm gonna root for my dad's Bills to get far, and that city deserves a winning football team. So we'll see how that happens this weekend. But certainly I'm gonna throw out some of the social media stuff. If you want to find us on Twitter, you can find myself at UFGoonerAJ. You can find Ian at GunnersFan6. You can find Bill, who's not on today. He will probably be on next time, though, at AFC Gooner O. Find the podcast at Eurosnob Pod, Facebook.com/Eurosnob Pod. Eurosnobpod.podomatic.com is where you can find the audio. Or you
just
can
be a normal person and go to iTunes.
Or go to iTunes. But some of you use the Podomatic. I saw the last one had quite a few listens there.
Yeah.
So as long as you're listening, I don't really care how you do it. But Ian, any final words as we close out here and say goodbye to the folks?
You know what? I'll love watching the rest of the season if we put performances in and have attacking displays like we did against Chelsea. So let's play some good football. Let's I want to enjoy Arsenal again. So that's what I want to see. Let's do that. Let's enjoy it. I hope you guys all enjoyed this podcast, as I hope you enjoy every podcast that we do. And let's go Arsenal. And if you don't have anything else, I'm just gonna sign us off, and we will talk to you guys next time.
All right, have a good one, everyone.